Hi, good morning everyone. Welcome to another edition of our post-cabinet press briefing. We're very pleased this morning to have with us the Minister of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Favour Williams. Also, we'll be having the Honorable Minister Desmond McKenzie, who is the Minister of Local Government and Community Development, who will give us an update on his sectoral presentation. We'll also have an update on the ENDS program by Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security. We will start with an announcement of cabinet decisions, and then we will have the presentations, and after which we will take questions from the media. I'd like to also welcome members of the media fraternity who are here with us today. Thank you for joining us, and I'll now invite the Minister Favour Williams, to come and present the cabinet decisions. Minister.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Let me acknowledge State Minister in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Robert Nesta Morgan, Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security. And you heard as well that the Honorable Desmond McKenzie will be here this morning. He's the Minister of Local Government and Community Development. Let me acknowledge as well the Permanent Secretary Acting at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Dr. Grace McLean, Dr. Kassan Troop, our Chief Education Officer Acting, also at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. All our team members from the ministry, members of the media, good morning. So we'll begin this morning with the major decisions from Cabinet. The first is the renaming of the Denham Town Infant School and the Denham Town Primary School in honor of former Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Edward Seaga. So Cabinet gave approval for Denham Town Infant School and Denham Town Primary School in the constituency of Kingston Western to be renamed the Edward Seaga Infant School and Edward Seaga Primary School, respectively. The government has established a tradition of honoring distinguished Jamaicans who made sterling contributions to national development and the advancement of the Jamaican people through their chosen fields of endeavor. Mr. Seaga served with distinction as Member of Parliament in the constituency for 43 years. During the course of his political life, Mr. Seaga made a significant impact on Jamaica's growth and development through the introduction of various programs and the establishment of institutions across the social, cultural, political, and financial sectors. The next decision of Cabinet relates to the National Council on Drug Abuse. Cabinet gave approval for the integration of the National Council on Drug Abuse, NCDA, to function as a department of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Cabinet also approved the repeal of the National Council on Drug Abuse Act 1991 to facilitate the integration. Amendments will also be made to the Dangerous Drug Amendment Act, which contains references to the NCDA. Cabinet also approved the issuance of drafting instructions to the Chief Parliamentary Council to facilitate the process. The actions will mean that the NCDA will no longer maintain its independent status, and all the administrative functions will be transferred to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, with its role and functions preserved. The merger of the NCDA into the Health Ministry will result in higher levels of operation. However, given the challenges with space where departments and agencies of the Ministry of Health and Wellness is concerned, they are based at various locations. The NCDA will remain at its current location on Malines Road in Kingston. The next Cabinet decision relates to the redevelopment and modernization of the University Hospital of the West Indies. Cabinet approved Phase 1 of the redevelopment and modernization program of the University Hospital of the West Indies and the inclusion of the project in the Public Sector Investment Program. Cabinet also approved the provision of a grant to the UHWI by the Ministry of Health and Wellness in the sum of $238.4 million. The current operations at the UHWI are fragmented and not coordinated like that of a modern hospital, and has an aged, outdated structure in need of replacement. In addition, the structure needs to be reconfigured, as the long-term development of the hospital could not be sustained by the current building stocks of small two-story buildings spread over many acres with open-air interconnection. In order to meet the growing healthcare needs of the public over the medium to long term, the UHWI is seeking to implement a redevelopment program for the upgrade of the existing medical facilities by demolishing old buildings and constructing 5 new medial towers on a phased basis, acquiring new equipment, among other things. For the next Cabinet decision, it relates to the Rio Cobre treatment plant. Cabinet gave approval for the National Water Commission, NWC, to enter into a 25-year public-private partnership arrangement with Vinci Construction Grants Projects, Epley Limited, and Jamaica Producers Group Limited. The 3 companies are collectively referred to as a special purpose vehicle. The agreement is to design, finance, construct, own, operate, and transfer 15 million imperial gallons of water per day to the water treatment plant in Content, St. Catherine. The NWC is required to supply an average of approximately 55 million imperial gallons per day to meet the water requirement in Kingston and St. Andrew during the dry seasons. In the worst case, under the current water production conditions, only 28 million imperial gallons is available for distribution in KSA during the dry season, representing a shortfall of approximately 27 million imperial gallons. To reduce the shortfall between water demand and supply in the Kingston metropolitan area in the medium term, the NWC sought to implement various initiatives, including the procurement of a 15 million imperial gallon water treatment plant at Content, St. Catherine. With the increase of the 15 million imperial gallon plant, the reduction in non-revenue water, it is expected that there will be a significant improvement in the water supply in KSA when the project is completed. In terms of the final Cabinet decision, it relates to an agreement between the government of the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and the government of Jamaica for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion. Cabinet gave approval for the double taxation agreement between the government of the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and the Jamaican government for the elimination of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and the prevention of tax evasion and avoidance. The general objectives of the bilateral tax agreements are to provide full protection of taxpayers against double taxation and to allow for the free flow of international trade or cross-border transactions and investment, as well as the transfer of technology. The aim of the agreement is to prevent discrimination between taxpayers in the international field and to provide a reasonable element of legal and fiscal certainty as a framework within which international operations could be pursued. The agreements foster cooperation between the tax authorities, thus enabling them to execute their duties more effectively. We turn now to the reports that Cabinet received and approved. Cabinet received and approved the following annual reports and/or financial statements to be tabled in Parliament. Housing Agency of Jamaica Limited, 2018-2019. Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation, JDIC, as of March 31, 2020. Public Accountancy Board, as of March 31, 2020. Planning Institute of Jamaica, December 2019. Casino Gaming Commission, March 31, 2020. And the University of the West Indies, MONA, 2019-2020. And 2021 to 2023 biennium budget. We move now to contracts. Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for the maintenance and support fees of the MyHR Plus system for the government of Jamaica in the amount of US $2.1 million, excluding taxes, to Quijes Consultores de Gasato. The MyHR Plus is the government's HR management and payroll system that has been rolling out across the government now for some time. And we're pleased at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information to say that we are in the process of this major implementation that we know will bring significant efficiencies to the ministry. Cabinet gave approval as well for the award of a contract for the procurement of works for the Windsor Community Water Supply Rehabilitation Project in Portland in the amount of $68.9 million, and this contract was awarded to Stone Plus Limited. Cabinet also gave approval for the award of a contract for the construction of a therapeutic treatment center in St. Andrew for the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, in the amount of $117.1 million, and this contract was awarded to Alpha Shore Structures and Roofing Limited, and JSIF is the implementing agency for this contract. Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for the provision of security services at the Cornwall Regional Hospital in the amount of $144.3 million, including GCT, and this contract was awarded to King Alarm Systems Limited. Cabinet also gave approval for the award of a contract for the installation and commissioning of a neurosurgical microscope at the University Hospital of the West Indies, and this contract was awarded to Leica Microsystems in the amount of 89.4 million Jamaican dollars. And this microscope is to allow surgery to be performed on different body parts by illuminating the body parts, making those bigger so the surgeons can see exactly with greater precision what they're doing. And we are happy for that instrument to be at our hospital. All right, so that concludes the major cabinet decisions. And I'll just now turn quickly to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Next Wednesday, May 26, 37,179 students will be sitting the primary exit profile PEP, the grade 6 ability test. We would like our students to know that the ministry has made all accommodations for them in order to have a safe and successful sitting of the exam. We've made special accommodations for our special needs students as well, in terms of whether or not they have asked for example, extra time, assignment of a reader or a writer, a prompter or a shadow, whether they've asked for preferential seating, so for example, they may ask to be seated at the front, and whether they've asked for allowances of breaks. A total of 320 students who submitted psychoevaluation reports. These were evaluated by our special education unit, and of this amount, 290 would have received the special accommodations. 5 applicants also will receive linguistic aid in terms of their language, their native language versus the English in which the exam is written. The ability test will be presided over by a contracted person or external to the schools. We've been training our presiding examiners and invigilators. We've been recruiting monitors, and we believe all is ready for next week, Wednesday, for the exam. We are encouraging our students the night before the exam to go to bed early. Do not study too much before the exam. Ensure you take at least 2 HB pencils to the examination and a clean eraser. Have a healthy breakfast on the morning of the exam. Be at the examination venue at least 1 hour before the start. Do not attempt to get help from anyone in the examination room. Direct all your queries to the presiding examiners or invigilators. And to our parents, we're saying do not interfere with the examination procedure. And your task is to ensure that the students get to the examination venues on time, and of course, imploring everyone to maintain all the COVID-19 protocols. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. At this time, we will welcome Senator the Honorable Mattis Amuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, to give us an update on the ENDS program. Minister.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Allow me also to acknowledge Honorable Minister Favour Williams, PS Acting Grace McLean, Chief Education Officer Dr. Kassan Troop. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to speak to members of the media related to the ENDS program. And I think it's important to remind Jamaicans exactly what ENDS is and how we would have gotten to where we are now. ENDS is the e-commerce national delivery solution. It's a registration portal for compliant businesses to operate during curfew hours. The platform provides businesses of various sizes the ability to utilize an online storefront, payment, and delivery solutions to facilitate business continuity during the curfew hours instituted to combat the spread of COVID-19. Any compliant business, vendor, or taxi, motorcycle courier will be able to operate during curfew hours once they have submitted the requisite documents and are verified and receive approval. Now, this program is built on equity and inclusivity. It comes from the Prime Minister's originally declared policy position in terms of how we would manage the COVID-19 pandemic, which is based in the fact that we would seek to manage lives and livelihoods. This program seeks to do just that. Businesses and couriers are required to complete an application form online to apply for a curfew passport, permitting them to operate during curfew hours. Approval for vendors and businesses are done via the Ministry of Local Government through the respective municipalities, while drivers and couriers are approved by the Ministry of Transport and Mining through the Transport Authority. Once approval is granted, a unique QR code is sent to the email address used in the sign-up process. This code can be stored digitally or indeed printed. The platform also displays the list of businesses that a customer can patronize during the curfew hours. So in essence, ENDS is a registration portal and a directory. Now, a lot has been made around whether or not ENDS secures data. Driver and business sign-up information is hosted safely on servers at the GOJ's data center. Customer information for those who are placing orders is not collected by the government, but rather the selected e-commerce and payment platforms from which the customer orders. And this is important. The government does not process any single order for any of these businesses. The government rather directs you to businesses with e-commerce platforms so that you're able to conduct your business directly with the businesses who are registered. There are several advantages to ENDS that we believe exist. ENDS allows the government to balance the lives and livelihoods of Jamaicans, as movement is restricted to reduce transmission of COVID-19. Businesses are afforded an avenue to serve their customers, allowing them to earn valuable revenue as well as keep their staff members employed. The processes associated with ENDS allows businesses and consumers alike the opportunity to become familiar with and ultimately embrace and engage in the digital economy. The creation of a culture of fulfillment through the formalization of our delivery economy and the strengthening of our delivery service providers is also a benefit. It creates the opportunity for every compliant business to reach consumers across the length and breadth of Jamaica and indeed the world. The ability to bring structure to the burgeoning business of payment service providers. It also allows the country to earn valuable GCT through the continuation of commerce during curfew hours. With the advent of ENDS, we have seen a marked increase in the interest of small and micro enterprises to join larger companies in establishing an e-commerce presence. Never before have we experienced the likes of small restaurants and pan-chicken businesses looking to the internet to bolster their business. We are also seeing a boom in the number of companies who are offering an end-to-end payment solution. Some of these companies have gone as far as tackling logistics of delivery, which augurs well for the future of the delivery economy and puts into sharp focus what we can achieve as a country in a very short time if we are properly motivated with the right policies, which are then enacted by this government. The companies that are new to the e-commerce space have been pulling out all the stops to retool their staff and infrastructure to include installing new hardware and software, as well as creating new apps to enhance the customer experience. We're now at the stage where I can report that we have applications from businesses in every single parish in Jamaica. We expect to have up to 248 businesses using the ENDS platform this weekend, and that is evenly spread right across the country. Persons who are also visiting the website would notice that several upgrades have been done by eGov in recent weeks, and the platform is much more user-friendly. This program, we believe, is a bit of a silver lining around the dark cloud, as it is moving several small and micro businesses into the 21st century. And I think it's important, in closing, just to acknowledge the partnership that the government of Jamaica has with the PSOJ on this project. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Minister Samuda, for that update. I suspect many Jamaicans are quite happy with the innovation of the ENDS, which has really liberated many businesses from some of the restrictions that have caused them to lose money over the last couple of months. We will now welcome the Honorable Minister Desmond McKenzie, Minister of Local Government and Community Development, coming out of his very important sectoral presentation yesterday in Parliament. Minister McKenzie, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister, colleague, cabinet ministers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I'd like to make a brief comment on the opening of the minister's presentation this morning in advising of a cabinet decision to rename the Denham Town Infant and Primary School in honor of a former Member of Parliament, the Most Honorable Edward Siaga. It is a very positive move because Mr. Siaga was a champion of education, especially at the primary and the infant level, and the building of Denham Town Primary and Infant was done through his instrumentality, and we are looking forward to that very, very special occasion which will take place later on. I want to share briefly with you this morning, arising out of my presentation in the sectorial debate yesterday, the work of the government as we continue to enhance and improve the quality of the less fortunate in our society. We spent a significant amount last year, both on infrastructure and developing the human resources of the poor relief system. And this year we will be spending a significant amount, much more than we did last year. We provided over some 30,000 meals across the country. In every parish, on a daily basis, we provide at least 2 meals. The homeless population is something that is of concern. It is growing the last count we had when we did the survey in the latter part of last year, has placed the homeless population to over 3,500. And I can assure you that the numbers might increase, because in that survey, it is just not possible to capture all those persons who are out on the street. So we are going to be increasing the support. We are establishing 2 brand new shelters in Falmouth in Trelawney and in Ochireus in St. Anne, and those 2 facilities will house collectively 80 persons respectively at those 2 locations. We are also carrying out infrastructure improvement work on a facility in the minister's constituency in Augustown that caters for a large constituency of persons who rely on the state. And these infrastructure development that we are putting in comes at a time when the demands are greater. We'll be spending some $18 million to renovate and to upgrade the facilities of the Denhamtown Golden Age Home. Other announcements that was made yesterday was this new initiative, Paint the City, Paint the Town. We are expecting that this initiative will generate some 3,000 jobs. Some of these jobs at the end of it will become permanent, but a significant portion of this will be part-time employment. We are expecting to create murals across the major town centers, clean up these communities, paint the markets, putting in proper road signs and directional signs, fixing sidewalks, correcting some of the entanglement that the disabled community is experiencing by putting in the necessary ramps in these town centers. So while we are undertaking this program, it is going to be a comprehensive program, and we will launch a program in the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew and Maypen, and this program will be rolled out over a 6-month period. It is expected that in the first phase of the program, we will be spending some $300 million to offset the costs of the program. As I said yesterday in Parliament, that this is not a program where somebody write down the name and turn up on a Friday evening to get paid. This is a program where we expect to get returns for taxpayers' dollar. And it is an initiative, ladies and gentlemen, that I think as a country, as we are grappling with the problems of COVID, that this is a part of the recovery. A clean city, a beautiful place, contributes much to the development of a growing nation. The Ministry of Local Government has been assigned rural development, rural water, rural electrification. We have undertaken a massive program that will help to stem the migration from many rural communities into urban centers, not just in the corporate area, but right across the country. We have identified 6 parishes where we will launch the first phase of this program, and we are expecting to spend in the first phase of the program some $650 million. And what we'll be doing in these various communities, putting in the various infrastructure, community centers, community parks, access to Wi-Fi services, indigent housing, water supply, electricity, and roads. This is a massive program, and it is going to be a program, it will be the first of its kind that will be undertaken. And we are expecting to get positive results out of this program. This initiative is one that, as I said before, will help us to stamp the government's intention on really improving urban and rural development in this year. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Mackenzie, for your presentation, as well as to Ministers Samuda and, of course, Minister Williams. Thank you so much to Minister Morgan. We are now also opening up the lines for members of the media to ask questions. We've indicated on our Zoom platform that you use the raise hand feature so that we will be able to acknowledge you, and then we will see the appropriate minister who will be able to respond to your questions. Thank you so much, ministers. We really appreciate it. And I do know that you are, of course, of service to members of the media this morning to clarify any matter that they may have to clarify. So let me now go over to Nadine Wilson-Harris from the Jamaica Gleaner this morning, who has raised her hand. And Nadine, you may now ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. To Mr. Mackenzie, just wanted to get an idea as to what percentage of the population is currently without water and electricity. And to the officials from the Ministry of Education, I know that mention was made of persons who, special needs students, and what allowances will be made for them, but want to get an idea as to those who probably need counseling as a result of the trauma experienced by the pandemic. I wanted to find out what's the nature of the request that you are seeing as it relates to that for students who are in need of counseling. Thank you.
It is difficult for me to give a precise number as to the percentage. But one thing I can say, in the parishes of Portland, Clarendon, St. Elizabeth, and sections of Manchester, there is a significant portion of those parishes that suffer from shortage of water. We are presently undertaking, by virtue of using the rural water, to do an assessment of those areas. So it's going to be difficult to answer the question in the way that you would like. And the similar response would be for areas that lack proper electricity. And that is why we have announced yesterday extending the program for rural electrification, where we are now providing house wiring and running off pole lines to take electricity to certain communities across the country that lack the resources. I hope I am able to respond in a positive way to the questions that you just posed.
Thank you so much, Minister. And now, Minister Williams on the education matters.
So thank you. With regards to the question as to the psychosocial support we're providing, I'm going to ask our Chief Education Officer to answer that question. But before I do, let me also mention, along the lines of support, I should have included that the ministry will be extending its support for transportation on the day of the examination for students who will require assistance. We do have a portal on our website, transport.moey.gov.jm, for persons to register their request. Additionally, they could call 888-SCHTIME or 888-724-8463 to register for support if they do not have access to the internet. And so we would like to know, so we're able to help you in terms of transportation on the day of the examination. Dr. True?
Okay. Good morning, ministers, and good morning to members of the media. With respect to the psychosocial support for our boys and girls preparing for their exams, as part of our resumption strategy, what we indicated to our principals and to our suite of education officers who are social workers and guidance counselors, was that psychosocial support was supposed to be the first set of activities that the students should have engaged in before any teaching and learning related to the content for the examination. So as part of the bulletin customary, we indicate that once the students regroup, psychosocial sessions should take place. Within our schools, we have trained guidance counselors. Within some of our small schools that do not have guidance counselors on their establishment, we establish what we call a cluster-based approach, where guidance counselors were engaged to move between 3 small schools in close proximity to provide psychosocial care for our boys and girls. In addition to that, the National Parenting Support Commission would have launched a suite of psychosocial helplines that our parents and students are able to access for support, and that is ongoing. The Ministry of Education from the central office also arranged for our guidance officers, our social workers, to do regional psychosocial virtual session for our boys and girls. So these are some of the activities that we have in place. But first and foremost, as I indicated earlier, all our educators, and they are accustomed to this because this is not the first time we are reintroducing face-to-face. For every time we re-engage the students, we encourage a suite or a set of responses to treat with the psychosocial. Students should talk just to share their experiences. The guidance counselors engage them in what we call the empty chair technique. They are engaged in role play. They are just engaged in talk therapy just to make sure that we understand what is happening to them and we can provide coping strategies, and also to reach out to their families to provide the additional support they need while they are at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kassan Troop, Acting Chief Education Officer at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Got a question from Javon Keys from TVJ, and this question is directed to Minister Mackenzie. What is the monitoring of the funeral restrictions showing, especially in light of information received by the TVJ newsroom and their own observation that reporting of clear breaches of the attendance is not taking place, and whether or not that has been effective? And also, what is the current state of the body storage across the island?
Well, let me state categorically that there are no funerals being held. So I'm not sure. Burials are being allowed where it is set that 15 persons, 10 mourners and 5 persons, the officiating pastors and those who are doing. What I can say to you is that based on our monitoring system, we are satisfied that we are getting the kind of compliance that is expected. Although there are cases where we have seen violations, and in instances the police have intervened when it becomes necessary. Just a reminder that funeral services with a body in the church is not permitted. Burials are permitted, and burials take place Mondays to Fridays between the hours of 10 to 4 p.m. Persons can hold memorial services, and we have been granting such requests when it is made to the Office of Disaster Preparedness. That has been done. But I will say that we are satisfied based on the monitoring that we are doing, but not to say that there are not persons that have been violating and steps have been taken against those who are found to be in violation. The question of the storage of bodies, we have not gotten any complaints from the end-of-life profession. So if that was a problem, they would have indicated so.
Thank you, Minister Mackenzie. Mr. Keys has another question, and this one is directed to the Education Ministry. So GISA is also I beg your pardon, let me go back to the top of that question. Mr. Keys would have sent in those questions via WhatsApp. So the Jamaica Independent Schools Association, JISA, says only about 12% of teachers have received the care grants to date. Mr. Keys wants to know if that is what the ministry's records are showing and if there is an update on those payments.
Yeah, I know that our PS has these numbers at our fingertip, and I am absolutely sure it's higher than 12%. PS?
Okay, Javon, just to say to you that when we last spoke, the number of persons who qualified were actually provided with the grants, and those were paid out, which of course is much more than 12%. And as we indicated, we are in active discussion with the Ministry of Finance. We are making progress. The President has been advised, and we are expecting that in short order we will be able to announce what has been the outcome of those discussions.
Dr. McLean, there's a follow-up question. JISA is calling for an update to the Education Act. As it states, the current act does not allow for the transfer of Government of Jamaica funds if needs be. Mr. Keys wants to know if this is something that the ministry is open to doing.
So the Education Act and the regulation has a section which is called the Independent Schools Regulation, which supports independent schools. Any changes to be made would have to be at the policy level, and I am sure over time our minister will review, and if changes are to be made at that level, we will be advised to advance the discussion and the process.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. McLean, the acting the acting permanent secretary at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Checking our Zoom platform to see if there are any more raised hands for media to ask their questions. All right, I believe, okay, Ms. Zara Burton, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I wanted to follow up, and I had made mention on Twitter about a question that was answered last week by Minister Morgan about protocols referred to at the last press briefing when it comes to board members or chairmen of entities getting contracts from the entities they serve on. It was a very confusing statement, and I think I really would love to hear some clarity about these protocols that you referred to last time around, about these directors being able to get contracts from the entities they serve on as long as the protocols are followed. Can you provide some clarity around that? Because I've done my own research, and the Ministry of Finance gave me a piece of legislation that would seem to indicate it's not allowed, but then, you know, of course, you have different information at your fingertips as well. So can you just clarify for the entire Jamaica once and for all, can chairmen or directors of public boards get contracts from the entities that they serve on?
Good afternoon. Well, good morning, Ms. Burton. I'm still trying to understand the question that you're asking, because you said that you have correspondence that says that persons on boards, which include chairmen, are excluded from contracts with the entities that they are chair of. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so I think the best way to do it would just be to refer to Section 42 of the Public Procurement Act, which is now in effect, which basically says if you have a conflict of interest, you're to be excluded.
From contracting?
Okay, why don't I just read it to you right now? 1 second, please. Just allow me. Just 1 second.
Hold on. No, Mr. Bernard, I'm asking you a specific question. Does the Procurement Act of Jamaica say that persons who are chairmen or members of boards are excluded from contracting with the government or the entity of which they are contracted?
Okay, so let me be clear on what it is that the legislation says. Okay? It says, all right, section 42, here we go. A procuring entity shall exclude a person, firm, or entity from procurement proceedings if, and this is part B, the person, firm, or entity has an unfair competitive advantage or a conflict of interest that is likely to impair the integrity of those procurement proceedings. That's what it says.
And
so
your
now I am
interpretation, Ms. Burton, and I'm just trying to get clarity so I can answer your question. Your interpretation of what you just read is that the chairman of an entity is excluded from a contract possibility because there's a presumed or perceived conflict of interest. Is that your interpretation?
Let's say this. I don't think it's for me to interpret.
Yeah, but you're the one asking the question.
No, hold on a second. The reason I'm saying I'm not sure it's for me to interpret is that when I wrote to the Ministry of Finance about the issue, okay, meaning that I asked specifically, can directors get contracts, right? The question that I asked to the Ministry of Finance specifically, right? They responded to me that section, right? It says references made to request in respect of guidance on the issue of whether a public body can award contracts to board directors of the same entity, and that is what they responded. So I'm asking you, since that is their response, what is yours?
Let me answer your question. And I have a cursory association with the law. So I do have some ability to read laws. But not that alone. The ordinary meaning of proceedings, procurement proceedings, means that an individual who has a conflict of interest should not be a part of a procurement proceeding. It does not mean that the individual's company cannot be a part of that procurement. But let me, because you did alert me that you were very concerned that I mentioned last week that there is a protocol in place for persons who may have a conflict of interest to benefit from government contracts, whether they be chairman or not. I decided to do some research, and I decided to speak to a couple of government lawyers who are familiar with the matter. And I will read to you what the current law says. And please, I'm asking you for a little time. 4.21 of the Government of Jamaica Public Procurement Handbook. Any GOJ employee involved in the procurement process who has entered into or is about to enter into financial or other business relationships that might involve a conflict of interest must immediately inform their supervisors in writing of the circumstances involved. This information is to be reviewed at an appropriate level and a decision taken as to whether there is a conflict of interest, and if so, what course of action to be adopted. A conflict of interest will arise when the individual has a direct or indirect relationship with a contractor, which may affect or might reasonably be deemed by others to affect impartiality on any matter related to their duties. It goes on. A public officer shall declare any relationship with a bidder, contractor, or consultant and shall take no part in either the decision-making process or the implementation of any contract where such a relationship exists. A personal relationship is defined as consanguinity or affinity. Disclosure may be made in writing or verbally in the context of a meeting. However, having made the disclosure, the individual shall not sit in the meeting while deliberations on the issue are being concluded. Under Section 42(1) of the Procurement Act, a procurement entity is required to exclude a person, firm, or entity from the procurement proceedings if B, the person, firm, or entity has an unfair competitive advantage or conflict of interest that is likely to impair the integrity of those proceedings. However, the guidelines encompassed in the GOJ Procurement Handbook allow for conflicts to be declared and for the individual to recluse him or herself from the process, section 421. And this matter has come about because of a question by your colleague and friend, Mr. Johnson, last week. And I will specifically address it again. Having regard to the facts, the chairman of the board of the Heart Trust did not participate in any of the procurement proceedings or deliberations related to the award of contracts to the firm which he heads, Syncon Technologies Limited. In addition, based on the value of the bids in which Syncon participated, neither the chairman nor the board was involved in any aspect of the procurement process, as all bids were below the $30 million board approval threshold. These processes were managed by the agency's procurement committee, of which the chairman is not a part, and approved by the then managing director. I suspect her name is Ms. Dyer. So to conclude, Ms. Burton, to confirm what I said yesterday, there is both a legal and an administrative protocol that deals with circumstances where persons who sit on boards may from time to time have contracts with the government. We're a small society. There are many cases, and I will not call people's names here, where persons of high repute in our society have sat on boards, heads of multinational entities residing in Jamaica, and those same companies have health insurance contracts, architectural contracts with the government in entities that they have some stewardship of. It would be very challenging for us to exclude some of our best and most talented persons who are interested in building our nation and contributing to national development because of perceived conflicts. What the laws outlined is a protocol as to how to deal with such perceived conflicts. I hope I have responded effectively to your question.
You've responded in parts to the question. I still, though, would like clarification. You said, I just want to make sure, because as I said, I consulted lawyers as well about the legislation, and they had a different interpretation from what you had mentioned just now. So the persons that you consulted were...
I did not give an interpretation, Ms. Burton. Ms. Burton, I did not give an interpretation. I went to the persons in the government who are expert on the matter and got a legal opinion from them. And the legal opinion wasn't their subjective view. It was extracted from the government procurement handbook as well as the law, which clearly says that if there's a perceived conflict of interest, there must be a declaration and there must be recusal from the procurement process. The procurement process is not the contracting of the entity, it's the process by which a determination is made as to if an entity qualifies to be contracted. So to conflate excluded from a contract to being excluded from a procurement process is a linguistic error that I think is being made.
Thank you, Minister Morgan, for your comprehensive explanation of the procurement guidelines.
Thank you.
Checking the Zoom platform, not seeing any more raised hands at this time. Oh, I beg your pardon. There is now a question from Mr. Jovan Johnson from the Jamaica Gleaner. Please unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. Jovan Johnson from the Gleaner. Minister of Information, Favour Williams, this is a question to you. Does the government condone the request and naming of journalists in the legislature?
Jovan. Repeat your question, and if you could
repeat your question, please, Jovan.
Yeah, and
Sure, no problem.
clarify.
Arising out of yesterday's PAC, I'm asking if the Andrew Holness administration condones the naming, the requests by legislatures, and the naming of journalists in the Parliament.
Minister Morgan, you want to deal with
Minister
that one?
Morgan
Yeah.
will just answer that question.
I think Mr. Johnson I must apologize, but we're a bit unarmed to answer that question, as it is significantly without context. I am not necessarily au fait with the circumstances from which this question comes, and I suspect that you may want to ask us formally so we can give a formal response, because we're pretty unarmed here in understanding the context of it. I don't know, maybe we're not as informed as we should be about events that took place yesterday, but I think give us some time to understand the context of what you're asking, because we are not aware.
Mr. Johnson? All right. Thank you. No more raised hands at this time. So this is where we're going to wrap up the post-cabinet press briefing. We just want to say thank you to members of the media for asking your question. This morning, we had the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Desmond McKenzie, Minister of Local Government and Community Development. He would have given an overview of his presentation yesterday in the sectoral debates. Also, Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, gave an update on the ENDS program. And the Honorable Robert Nesta Morgan, Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Dr. Grace McLean, Permanent Secretary acting in the Ministry of Education, and Dr. Troop, Chief Education Officer acting at the Education Ministry. We hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and God bless you. Good morning.